All right, hey Gundam fans, welcome to another episode of Gundam Explained. For this episode, we're going to talk about a new Gundam manga that has come out that is part of Universal Century. It's in Japan only right now, and it's just the first issue, but within the greater Gundam Ace or Gundam magazine that exists that comes out monthly. They have sometimes have stories, and this time they have one called Rust Horizon. And yes, it's another one in Universal Century, and it takes place during the 1-Year War. But before we get started, if you haven't, please subscribe. And as you watch this video, if it's pretty cool, give it a like. Also, if you're interested in some of the supporter perks that are available, please check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Gundam Explained. But yeah, let's get started. All right, first of all, you can check the link I'll have in the description so you can just click on it easily. But Zionic Republic.net is the website you can go to search through and read tons of translated official Gundam material, whether that's just interviews done only in Japanese, notes of some kind, behind the scenes production stuff, and manga themselves, especially ones that haven't been translated. And, you know, I wanted to throw out this link too because there's an option to donate because there's someone that does this for their free time. Dikichu is the name of the individual here on the website. But they also have a Twitter. They're probably worth a follow. They're always translating some very interesting things when it comes to Universal Century, especially a lot of the world building. And I've covered it in the past, something like the various suits, the evolutions of like the normal type suits, for instance. I think it's pretty interesting. But you can go on the link right now and check out the first volume or the first issue of the manga for Rust Horizon. And just quick, the flames of war spread to the rusty horizon, a war that tastes of dust and iron. Universal Century 0079, another 1-Year War is told on the war zone of North America, yet something is wrong on the gravity front. The battle for the sacred arc that will jolt the Universal Century now begins. So, this is a translation. When they talk about sacred arc, is this just supposed to be something we already know about and it's just the way it's being described? Or is the sacred arc something new, some new object that is the center point for this Rust Horizon? Curious to see what that would be exactly, and it could be what we might be seeing at the end of this issue as I kind of go through it. All right, here we go. Here is the cover of that magazine that I'm talking about. It says Grand Jump something. Who knows what all of this stuff is? Actually, I'm sure a lot of people do, especially the majority of the population of Japan and whoever translated this. But really, the cover of this is showing what the Gundam unit, the premier unit of this story is. And it's very interesting what we see here. It looks like a Gundam, sure, but we're seeing some remnants of like the Pale Rider. You see that antenna. Also, when it comes to the Gundam V-fin, we aren't getting a full V-fin. We are getting a half V-fin, but it also has the 3, something that seems to be normal in other UC or non-UC properties, right? Like Seed, Wing, etc. I don't know how often we're actually seeing that within Universal Century. But in this case, we're just seeing half of it. So it's a very unique and interesting design they're going with. At the same time, you could think, oh, another 1-Year War story, another Gundam we haven't heard about. And yeah, that does seem pretty crazy, but at the same time, it's just kind of cool that we get this new stuff. And, you know, something else to keep in mind is we're looking at a manga here, and from what I understand, the manga is sort of canon compared to the anime. The anime or the cartoons are their own, or their movies are their own canon that coincides with the video games. And a lot of times what comes out of the novel or the manga might not be exactly canon, but it can still fill some gaps and give some plot elements to things that might be animated later on. So we're kind of getting an interesting beginning here because in a lot of UC, especially 1-Year War stories like we see in the side stories, they almost retell the very beginning of the conflict. And we're kind of getting that here over, someone listening on the radio. And very cool, the radio has a little screen on there that's just showing some more tech. They're working on their ground Gundam, which looks awesome, or I should say GM. And we're actually getting a good look of the logo for Rust Horizon, which looks pretty cool. It's got the giant G here, and it also has a little Gundam silhouette. But yeah, someone's doing some repairs while they're listening to Giran, and actually he's talking about how Garma just died. So again, another thing we get from a lot of these 1-Year War stories is they take place either right at the time or shortly after Garma is killed. I think that just kind of changes the pace of the war. Also, by this time, the Federation has a lot more mobile suits actually in production. So maybe at this point, they finally get all of these prototype suits, all these different Gundams we've been seeing for so long, finally out there to be used. And I'm not going to read everything. I'm just going to flip through it, but it's good if you want to check it out for yourself. But I like what we're seeing here. We're seeing this helmet destroyed. You know, they're doing that kind of intro discussion again. It's just very cool what we're getting here. The atmosphere, the detail of the war going on. And this takes place in North America at the Grand Canyon. There's a Type 61 tank there. Really good shots here. So at the end of the day, this is something worth looking through so you can see the cool shots they have of like the Type 61. We got those GM ground types. Getting some cockpit views here. We can see the ground type unit right outside. Very cool looking. And you kind of get to learn the attitudes of these characters. Here's another cool shot here. And I guess they see some horses coming in. So here in the main story of what's kind of going on here is we have this team out in North America. They're actually supposed to find a new commander, I guess because they lost theirs. But they come across this cavalry, which is pretty interesting. They don't know if they're Federation or Zeon. You meet this cool guy in a cowboy hat. He's saying he saw a Zaku. Now, what's interesting about this is they're actually they spotted who they think is their commander to go and save. But what you'll find out by reading this is it's really this guy in a cowboy hat, which is pretty cool. It's a cool kind of interesting character to use there. Another cool panel here. I love the look of what we're seeing here with the ground Gundams and the Type 61. And really good art. This is where they've got the Federation has, or the Zeons have a Federation soldier captured. And it's just kind of cool what they're going through here and the detail of the artwork. So we see here men from the California base are on a warpath. And that's speaking about the California base that existed for the Zeon, obviously in North America. And during this time with Garma being killed and then the Zeons are kind of fleeing Earth, there was a lot of activity going on at California base. We even see that in Code Fairy and a lot of the side stories we talked about. Now, this is sick. Just looking at this, we see the Zaku with this giant Gatling gun. Now, it's not one that's similar to what we see with the Goof custom, where it would just be like on one arm in a way. This is where he's kind of holding a Gatling gun, and it just looks awesome. Cool. We get some air fighting as well. Some more cool shots of the GM ground. It's always cool to see those. And some anti-air going on. The panels are noisy, but if you take your time and look at it, you can really see some awesome poses going on, some really cool frames of action. Oh, really cool shot here. Look at that, the arm getting blown off, a kick to get him out of the way. Very cool stuff. And I love the way that Zaku looks because it's got that kind of commander fin sort of thing going on in the middle, even though it has its own sensor on it as well, right? We're not too used to that. And also it's got the antenna on either side. So that's a very cool looking Zaku. I don't know if I've seen one like that, and maybe it does exist. And, this is when the cowboy dude reveals that he is the commander that they've been looking for to meet up with. And so it looks like in order to battle against the Zakus, they're trying to come up with more of tactics to use on the ground against the mobile suits because they're kind of outnumbered. Yeah, he even calls out a booby trap. So yeah, they're getting affected by all this stuff. Really cool panel here. Just looks awesome. That guy got shot up. Yeah, he certainly did. And then them just standing there, that just looks cool. You see the corpse of what's left of the Zaku, the smoke, and those ground GM units standing in the back. It just looks great, and you can see the emblem here. All looks awesome. It's interesting how they have the discussion about there being a bug in the attitude control program. I guess it has to do with the fact that they're talking about the history in developing the mobile suit, the Zaku mobile suit, and as it was more of a kind of commercial private use for manufacturing, and then they modified them to be used for weapons purposes. So whenever there's, I guess, an issue with the Zaku that comes up due to, we don't really see this too much, but I guess in specific instances something could happen like they're talking about here. It had to do with a bug in its program due to it being not used for weapons or whatever originally, and that's just remnants in its software. Then it jumps to December of 0079 at the Cape Kennedy spaceport. And what's interesting is that commander is there, so it seems him and his team. So it seems like they're still doing their real thing, and they talk about a coffin. Okay, they're talking about a coffin that they need, and what this is I guess some sort of, they call it a coffin. We don't have details yet. That makes me think she's dead, but she's like in some cryo sleep, or her body is just, I guess, being frozen for a purpose. And this is Islania. This is Garma's, fiance, I believe. I think one of the supporters of the channel helped clarify that from the original Mobile Suit Gundam. And what this guy is saying is Master Garma's Imperial children are to be conceived along with the womb in which, and then something happens. But so what we're seeing here is, did they have Garma's wife frozen? Was she dead? Or fiance frozen? And the purpose is they would artificially inseminate and have it produce children, so more than one. Or is it that she's potentially pregnant and maybe it's twins and they have her frozen to see if they can safely, I guess, have them born, even though it's possible she's dead? So we don't really have the details yet, and we'll probably get to that more as it goes. But if we look at then the future of the Universal Century, we don't see that talked about at all anywhere. There's always little things about maybe Glemmy, was it him that could have been a clone of Giran, and then there's Maneva, and then I'm totally forgetting about this, but there was another child of someone's, and I totally forgot who that was, but it's only in the manga version. So that's why there's like this difference of canon. And something else I wanted to point out that the translator noticed is, if you look at the earpiece he has, it almost looks like, the Apple Buds, but it's a Haro, which is just pretty cool to see that there. But then all of a sudden, during this confrontation, you see the beam saber ignite from this mobile suit arm, and then it shoots. It reminds me of Thunderbolt, but you see the beam saber blade come down right in front of these pilots here. And someone, calls out a Gundam. And that's when we're kind of getting a look at this. So it's kind of dark, so you can't see too well. You can kind of see a little glistening right in the center. But if you look off to the right, there are 3 lines that could be making up what is that half V-fin in a way. But then down at the bottom, it's just cool to see one hand holding the beam saber, the other one holding a destroyed Zaku helmet. Looks very cool. And then, this last panel here, we see that new Gundam, which we don't have a name for yet. Very curious to see what it is, but it's got the half V-fin thing going on, sort of like Pale Rider in a way. So really curious to see what that becomes. So anyway, curious what everyone thinks about it. It's just interesting for me that we get all these stories that take place during the 1 Year War, and we just happen to have this new one here and a new Gundam again. So very cool. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you read manga normally? What are your thoughts on that versus the anime canon? I think it's okay. They're different mediums to kind of have their different interesting little details and stories. It makes it a bit more interesting. But just the look of that Gundam, I can't wait to see more. Can't wait to get an official name and then a model kit potentially. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll talk again.